Hello, this is History After Hours podcast. This is September 14th, 2015. And my name is Kevin Pumphrey. And with me, and he will always be with me probably, is Mr. Ron Franklin.
Yeah, we've decided to be partners now. We've been neighbors for a long time, and we've decided to hook up and do this podcast thing. I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, so the deal is we're going to try to do this at least once a month and maybe even more, depending on how much time we have. And we're just going to get together and debate current topics and, maybe teach a little bit of history since we're both history teachers. And,
some not so current topics.
Right, yeah. Yeah, some stuff way back when. And we're just going to see how this thing goes. The plan is, as of right now, we'll have it available on iTunes. You'll be able to get to it through Twitter as well. We'll come up with an account, and I can figure that out a little bit later. So
You got to say it like the old people. The iTunes.
The iTunes.
We're going to have it on the iTunes and on the Twitter.
We'll put
So
it
be
on
looking for it on the Twitters.
the internet. Okay, so Mr. Franklin, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got in this crazy business of teaching history.
Oh man, I tell you, this is not my first career. I really started off in retail management. Worked that for about 10 years or so after college, and thought that was really going to be my life. But it's a hard road. There's not a lot of time with your family. There's a lot of things that it takes you away from it. Decent money, but at the same time, you just not, quality of life is something that you have to think about. My wife teaches. She's been teaching about 10 years longer than I have. And when I was struggling trying to figure out what I wanted to do, she said, you really ought to think about going back and being a teacher. You'd be good at it, And really, in a sense, the thing about being a manager, you're teaching people to do certain things, and it's kind of became. I thought about it more and more. And I thought, you know what, this is a good time to do that. So
Did you have your degree?
Yeah, I already had a degree. I actually have, believe it or not, I have a BFA. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and then I also went and I had some business schooling at the same time. So I freelanced art in between, and then did that as a regular paying job. So. But anyway, but stepped into school, wasn't sure what I was going to do, and decided that history was my thing, and just stuck with it and stepped right into a job after school. Got my teaching license, and here we go.
So how long were you in retail again?
I did that about 10 years or so as a manager, and then I've been doing this. This is my 12th year to teach.
Oh, okay. So were you into history like when you were in high school? That was your favorite subject, or
Nope.
was it just something you grew into?
No. I had a disdain for the way it was taught, but I really liked, historical things. I liked seeing cause and effect. And my dad was one of those guys who was like always trivia minded. Hey boy, like when did this happen? And we're always like knocking things around,
Right.
And I've always intrigued by travel, and I like to study maps and whatnot. So it just sort of became the thing. I understand it. I like historical process, and then once I got into it, I knew it was the thing that I wanted to do forever. I mean, this is just I love teaching history.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit different. I mean, I was an athlete, and I wanted to coach. That was my thing. And I got into college for coaching. I graduated for coaching, and I didn't enjoy teaching, nor did I really want to be a classroom teacher when I started. But, after 3 or 4 years of really losing very badly at everything I was coaching and not sleeping at night,
It happens,
stressed. Also, I taught next to a guy who he also taught me when I was in high school. Then I was teaching next to him, and it's Mr. Bill Remo, which you've met.
Mm-hmm.
And he was such a good mentor for me and really got me inspired to really be a good teacher instead of, being one of those coaches that are not very good.
Right. When you see somebody do it and do it well, it's inspiring, and that's and realistically, when I think about when I was in school and I was thinking about what kind of teacher I wanted to be, I kind of took all those people that I thought did it poorly, and I used them as a role model. Like, here's how not to approach
Right.
the teaching of history, because if it's just memorization and regurgitation of that information, it is just boring.
Right.
And that's stuff you can look up. Who cares? You need to know the timelines. You need to know those things. But realistically, that's not the fun part about history to me. And when people kind of discover that too, that it's about societies, and it's about interactions, and it's about how these cultures either worked or didn't work, or why they fell apart, or and all the intriguing things, and to watch all of society build up to what we know today, I just think that that's really it's an interesting process. So again, I'm the cause and effect guy. I want to see it build from the Stone Age to the Tech Age,
Right.
and go off into space. So that's just like I said, that's the part that intrigues me most.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoy history, and I tell the kids on the first day, look, you can Google everything I'm telling you. They live in a world where information is at their fingertips constantly, so it's not really a matter of memorizing stuff. Although I do make them memorize some stuff, it's more about learning how history affects things, how people interact. It's learning how to write in history and analyze information and use evidence to support stuff.
Well,
I mean, that's the stuff.
like you
gotta
said,
teach.
memorizing facts is one thing, but being part of a historical process, learning how a historian learns and how you view, right? And then you mix in all the other things too. You mix in science, you mix in math, you mix in all the writings and to teach about the religions. You know, we have the benefit of teaching everything.
Yeah.
Right? Every other subject
It's in
comes into
every
play
subject,
into
yeah.
ours, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I spent time talking about science and math,
Mm-hmm.
and we just did Euclid. And,
Yeah, hey, we hit Euclid
Newton
today, as a
and
matter of
all-
fact.
Yeah, so.
All you geometry people can celebrate Euclid.
That's right. Well, we'll and we'll probably talk a little bit about strategies that we like and that we use on later podcast. This one's just kind of more of an introductory one, and we're going to see where this goes. But more than anything, we're going to hopefully have a system set up where the listeners can email us questions at the end, and we can start debating some of those things.
Yeah, we want this to be interactive. I mean, we want people to challenge us so that we can talk about. See, here's the thing, people. We do this anyway. We just stand in the hall in between class and we just talk to each other. And then when we have a little bit extra time, we just hit each other with questions like, "Hey, what do you think about this or that?" You know, or we, and so that debate. And this is Pumphrey's idea. Totally, I give him complete credit. He said we should record this and let people hear it because we're interesting and cool and people should know that more. Just broadcast that out to the world.
Yeah, we're hoping, we're going to start off with promoting and getting some of our students to listen if they can stand it, and maybe give them secret assignments during the podcast to prove that they listened.
Yeah, we can go all Illuminati on them and give you secret information, stuff that you won't hear anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, I was coaching, and I said that it was horrible because I was stressed out. And I remember leaving my hometown and coming towards Arkadelphia. That's where I live now, but going to another school, and they said, there's no way you're going to be able to find a history on the job.
Yep, I heard that too.
Especially since I already had a coaching endorsement on my certificate, they're going to make me coach. And I was just like, I didn't. But I have been blessed. I've had 3 jobs in a row where I didn't have to coach, and I got to do what I love to do, which is just teach history. And and now I'm teaching all advanced classes, which is amazing, fun, and I'm trying to teach your AP World, which I'm gonna gladly give that right back to you next year.
Oh no,
hopefully.
it's fun. You'll like it.
But
I tell you what, and you talk about the endorsement aspect. When I was going through, this is not. I mean, it wasn't traditional it wasn't non-traditional licensure. I went back and got the full thing. But at the same time, every time I told somebody, they go, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to teach history." They said, "Oh yeah, what do you coach?" I'm like, "No, I'm going to teach history." And again, nothing against coaches because you were one too, and you get that. But at the same time, oftentimes because you're a coach, you're pulled away so desperately from the classroom setting because you've got all these other obligations. It just becomes problematic sometimes.
It's very, very difficult to be a good coach and a good teacher at the same time. And I know people would say, well, if you're a good coach, you are a good teacher, and that's true. But you don't have enough time to prepare.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
When you're driving that yellow bus all over the state, it's just a rough situation.
You're not going to get home till 11 o'clock tonight, and how are you going to prepare for an AP class tomorrow?
Oh, man. Yeah, and I just remember how tired I was constantly coaching. And then you're stressed out. And if you're a head coach or your job depends on winnings and losses sometimes. So that's another added stress.
Well, yeah, and I didn't want people to misunderstand that coaching's awesome. I'm glad that we have that aspect. But at the same time, that wasn't what I wanted to do. And there were people that were concerned for me saying, you're going to struggle to get a job.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to just like I said, I graduated one day and stepped into the job the next. It was awesome. Yeah.
Well, when I was going through college, back in like the 70s and 80s, people that coached, they taught PE or health. That was it. Well, the market got flooded with that. And so they started telling me back when I went in college, you've got to pick something. It needs to be either math or history. So I was like, okay, well, I can barely add and subtract. So I'll go with history. And so I just fell into it. But then I fell in love with it once you learn it. I mean, I didn't know anything about history. And I went through college, taking college history classes, and still really didn't get it until I started teaching it. And you know this, when you teach it, you remember, 90% of what you teach. So So after that, yeah, that was
Yeah, you know, I think that's what part of what still keeps me interested every single year to try to do a better and better job is that I learn from it every single year as well. You know, I try to add something new to the process, and I'm always involved in trying to better the story that I can tell so that I can get I want to learn more about the real people and what were their lives like and try to make it as engaging as I can. So I'm learning too. That's the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to do stuff like this, think outside the box, and what else can I do? I wish I could go back and apologize to the students I had my first 4 or 5 years. I mean,
Not me. I've been good at it since the very beginning. Don't take that stand. Don't
Oh, it was
come in
horrific.
strong, totally from the day one.
Yeah.
And you should say that too, even if it's not true. Just say it.
Okay, yes,
History, and that's the other thing. We can just make stuff up. See, people have to believe us because we're history teachers.
that's true. That's true.
Just say it, and you will believe it, people.
I had Francis Bacon on my wall of influence people, and I convinced some students that he was the first one to learn how to cure pig meat
Nice.
into bacon. And
The first one to convince people it was okay to eat it.
Yeah,
Forget what the religions say. Eat this.
yeah,
It's crispy. It's good. It's golden.
changed the world.
Right.
But I eventually did correct and tell him the truth that it wasn't. He wasn't really. It's just a coincidence.
No offense to people with dietary restrictions, by the way.
That's right. All right. Well, let's move on. Let's see. What is your favorite thing to teach?
Oh, Lordy. Let's think about that, shall we?
Oh, by the way, if you don't know, he teaches world history, and I'm a U.S. guy mainly, and so we're coming at it from two different angles there.
We, from the world, see, it's the thing. You gotta, when you break this down, so you have the ancient dudes that are really cool, you have the foundational people. I really like the Neanderthals, the people that were just running around, because I have a high respect for nomads, actually, believe it or not.
Oh yeah.
So, you're just winging it every single day. What are we going to do? How are we going to survive?
It's just survival.
Yeah. Did you see the thing where the explorers found the new set of human-like bones in the cave/burial site there in South Africa? Like, they've just published their reports.
Did this
I've been
something
seeing it
happen
come
recently, or was
Yeah,
this
yeah, it's
last
like
year?
No, this was within. I mean, I don't know when they actually
I
discovered
haven't
it,
seen it then.
but it was on. I saw it on BBC and some other things, and so it's like this new humanoid, I guess, is the thing.
Older than.
They haven't dated it yet, so they're still waiting on that. But these there was like several meters underground where they discovered these bones, like spelunkers found them or something, just exploring these places. But what
That's
it
a great
is
word,
these
spelunkers.
are non-human entities that apparently were burying their dead. And so to think that so that's one of the definitions of being human that we have. So if this is what they think it is, which is a burial site with about 15 or 16 people that they found down there, and they have a combination of non-human and human aspects to them, and they apparently walked upright and had the feet that would allow that to happen. But this may change the definition of how we focus on ourselves. At one time it was like, oh well, we make tools. Well, we found out other animals do that too, so we had to change the definition.
Right,
So
yeah.
we'll
Well,
skirt that
it's-
along a little bit. Anyway,
This is what we mean by history changing. It's always.
yeah, you find something new and we have to add it to it. So anyway, that's tangential, I suppose, but I just thought it was kind of cool. My favorite thing I think to teach, though, when I think about world history, I really like the Mongols story because most people don't hit that very hard.
I don't think you liked him if you'd lived back then.
Well, I don't know if I was one,
Okay, there you go.
So yeah, but yeah, they were rough guys, but that's a story that is intriguing, to be able to when they finally organized themselves and come riding out over the rest of the territories, everybody else was in trouble once those guys got their act together. So I really like them.
Which group developed the stirrups, or do we know?
I want to say that was a Chinese invention that the Mongols then picked up on, or vice versa. I don't remember which way that happened.
That greatly improved their
Oh yeah.
accuracy and being
Yeah.
able to ride. And
Have you ever
bow
ridden?
arrow.
I mean, do you ride? I mean, yeah, you grew up on a
Oh,
farm though,
yeah.
so you rode, yeah. So I mean, imagine not being able to stand up in stirrups to be able to help control yourself on that horse. I mean,
Right.
saddles are one thing, and they did. I see. That's what I'm thinking. I think the Chinese invented stirrups, and then they took advantage of it because they were the horsemen of the north. But they had cool saddles, and that helped keep them in track. But once you can stand up in those stirrups and you can ride farther, faster, you have more control. You can turn around the saddle and do cool military maneuvers or whatnot. So
You know what makes me happy is that we're assuming we know some of this stuff, and I just hope that there's somebody screaming at their windshield right now as they're driving.
No.
It wasn't the Chinese.
no.
That
No,
brings me pleasure.
According to the History Channel, it was aliens. So let's go ahead and get that out of the way right now. It was not aliens. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and put my reputation on the line and say that's probably not it. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it was not it, not a probably to it. Okay, so big
Yeah.
hair man, like you're out of luck.
Yeah, the nomadic people and those the Mongols, the Huns, those dudes,
Mm-hmm.
they collapsed empires.
Right, yeah.
You know.
Things got twisty when they started doing what they do. So I like that, and part of it, like I said, I love all the stuff that we generally skipped when I was a kid. You know, I'm really fascinated by African history, Indian history, Chinese. You know, because we go, well, there's the wall, and that's all we ever learned about it when we were kids. You know,
Right. Yeah.
so to bounce that up and to see how cool they were and how long they really were, who they were. You know, I just I love all those stories.
So
So
I'm learning all that right now in AP World, teaching
Yeah.
this for the first time. I'm having to study on China,
Mhm.
China and India and all that.
when do you get to the Islam stuff? Like when do you see Muhammad
Next.
and all that? Is that coming up next?
Yeah, we do the religion. and all
Man, those guys, that's impressive too.
that. Oh,
Like
they
you were talking about people that get organized because they were really disorganized, and then when they finally get themselves together,
how
and,
quickly they spread across.
oh my gods and
Africa
opposites.
and-
Yeah, buddy.
You know.
What about you?
I guess for U.S. history, I love the Revolution story. I used to not care as much about it, but that John Adams book.
Well, that's where I was fixing to ask you. Like, who's your revolutionary guy? If you're talking about revolution, you got to have a guy. I mean,
Yeah,
do you go
I mean-
George Washington like everybody else, or do you like?
Well, I just became fascinated with John Adams and Alexander Hamilton, those two guys, and Thomas Jefferson to a degree as well. But I guess your main founding fathers, I'm fascinated with all of them. But there's so much I learned about John Adams and I had no clue. Like he was an ambassador to the Netherlands when he found out that we won the war. I can't imagine. So he spent most of his time away from his wife and family, and so he's halfway around the world when he hears that we got our independence. And so it's just and then the letters between him and his wife, Abigail, those are
Right.
obviously legendary. I just like studying that time period. It's just such a different way to live because they were right on the heels of the Enlightenment and all that,
Mhm.
and they changed everything. I mean, they decided, let's try this type of government.
See,
and
if you're thinking, since like I said, you haven't been doing the world that long, but you've taught world history before, I know.
Mhm.
So, like outside of what I've already said, like an outside, revolutionary process here in the United States, like what else might you focus on?
I'm a big Renaissance guy. That's one of my favorite. Of course, going into these trips.
Oh yeah,
See how
travel. Oh man, you guys
Going
don't.
to
We
Italy and-
here's the thing. Let's go ahead and do this little side story. We got a chance to travel. I have not been outside the U.S. very far. I mean, and when I have gone, it's usually a place that we already own. So, but Pumphrey's been doing these educational tours for a long time, and I finally got to go on one last year. And I tell you what, to be able to go and to see these places that we've been talking about, and to actually stand in the midst of where greatness has been, is really awe-inspiring. And so, I really appreciate you, convincing me to hook up on that thing. So
we're going to Paris, London this time.
that's right. It's gonna be awesome too.
About to have a meeting about that here in about an hour. But yeah, that makes it. Yeah. So after visiting Italy and even when we went to Milan and then on down to Florence and Rome and all that,
You-
it's just
you
makes
get caught
it,
up in the spirit of it. Those guys
yeah.
were great.
When you're walking through the streets of Florence and you see the Medici, there's bridges and it's just traveling makes history teaching even more fun because then you can tell students, hey, I was there. I know
Mhm.
what this looks like. So yeah, probably Renaissance as far as that whole time period. I like that.
That I like Enlightenment, like you said. I also like the Romanticism, the whole Napoleon stuff, but not so much about Napoleon as the transformations that happened after Napoleon. That the whole Romantic age, where everything is sort of trying to get itself back in order after all the violent ramifications of his rule changed. It's a pivot point for a lot of places, not just on that side of the planet, but also over here.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm intrigued by that. And then we get the whole Manifest Destiny thing that happens with us, and that's actually what I'm doing my research on for my master's thesis. So it's
Yeah, there's some really fun topics. I mean,
it's hard to nail it down to just one.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that AP you have to push so fast. Sometimes you want to just stop and enjoy, and spend more time on certain things, and it's hard to do. I mean, you
Mhm.
try, but
Yeah, they make you move. That's
yeah,
for
you
sure.
got to keep on rolling. Speaking of keeping on rolling, this is September 14th. So a few days ago, I did a little thing in my classroom to remember 9/11. So we thought we would. What was your experience? I mean, where were you at when 9/11 happened?
I actually wasn't teaching. It's hard for me to believe that it's been 14 years.
Yeah.
because it's and I was telling the students this, it's just so vivid in my memory that it just it seems like it just happened, even though so much has happened since. But I was still working in retail, and I heard about it on the radio on my way to work that morning, and I had a television in my office, and the store that I was working on, we weren't even open yet. I mean, we were still building it actually, and I went inside to my office and had a TV in there and watched the whole thing unfold live, sort of in person, and it was that kick in the gut moment, like everybody says, So, and then the day got worse, obviously, as we went on through. People, the town was weird. I don't know, where were you? Were you in?
I was teaching second period, teaching history.
Wait, where were you? I mean,
in Sheridan.
Oh, you were in Sheridan. Okay.
Arkansas. Yep. Teaching 11th grade U.S. history.
Did you find out about it while it was happening?
Yes. As a matter of fact, they came on the intercom and said something happened. Everybody needs to turn their TVs on.
Oh.
And this is when they had those TVs bolted to the wall.
Right. Yeah.
You get like 2 channels. But it really took me a couple days to wrap my head around it. I mean, I knew it was tragic and it was horrible. The uncertainty of how, what else is going to happen. Because remember, the one plane hit, then another plane hit, and then another plane hit. So it's like, how big is this thing?
Right. Yeah, you didn't know where it was going to stop.
And then they grounded the planes, which is incredible.
Imagine all the planes in the sky and no more on the radar, and anybody that was still left they were authorized to shoot them down.
Yeah,
that was the
fighter
idea.
planes roaming the skies.
We had it was a strange, like I said, we watched it happen, and then you got that sick feeling, and again, you didn't know where it was going to stop, what's going to happen next.
But it definitely changed everything.
Well, yeah, and I mean immediately too, because people were uncertain, even here in Hot Springs, which is we're not this mega metropolis, we're growing, but we're not these major cities, but there were the police were moving around, there were military personnel. I was telling students the other day when we were talking about this that I had gone out towards we have the 3 lakes in the area, and we had gone out towards Blakely Dam, which creates Lake Ouachita here in our area. And we were going out there just to kind of relax and to get our mind off stuff because it had been so bad. And I didn't realize, and I should have thought about it, but I didn't until we got there. We approached the dam, and there's there's a armored Humvee sitting in the middle of the road, and armored personnel standing there going, "Hey, you're gonna turn around." And I got obviously we did, but I didn't think about them considering Blakely Dam a potential target, and which now it makes sense because. I mean, if they did target that, what are the chances? But still, what if, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Ouachita is a big lake,
yeah.
Especially for this area, and if it washed out into this area, like there's a lot of people that are in trouble. So, but that experience was interesting because you see firsthand. It wasn't just in New York, it wasn't just in Pennsylvania, it wasn't just in Washington D.C. It's impacting people across the nation. And then, we had the whole war on terror aspect, and we were proud to go, and people were signing up right and left, and that's admirable. But at the same time, that we're left with this sort of lingering paranoia, and even this much longer, it's still odd, I think, to see that happening. And granted, we are a target, and
yeah. It was a weird time. I mean, it was a horrible tragedy, but just the way that our country, you remember the year after, like just that next year, how unified our country was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It seems like everybody was on the same page. The
right.
support of President Bush was enormous.
Mm-hmm.
It was a crazy time thinking about how unified our country became over that. And I guess which makes sense.
Where do you think that started to falter? Was it before his presidency was over, second term? Or
yeah, I think when Iraq wasn't going so well,
right.
I think probably 2005 it started to really. I mean, there's increased criticisms, obviously. There was a few people, obviously, when we went in, 2003,
mm-hmm.
that thought it was a bad idea, but you really didn't hear too much. I mean, for the most part, it seemed like everybody was okay with it at first, but then when
right.
it just kept on.
Well, the whole
and
weapons
on
of mass destruction, bid that Colin Powell put out there, and people are like, well, we got to go get that guy because he's obviously going to be part of the problem. And so, I think that moment, I think you're right. That moment when we divert from Afghanistan and we swoop over into Iraq, I think that's when people started to question this, what the intentions fully are. How is this helping us in general? And what's the scope? How are we going to limit that? Where's it going to stop? And obviously it hasn't, because we've expanded out and we've gone into other places. And then again, we talk about ramifications, things that bounce out from that. You know, we talk about the Napoleon story, but this is kind of, you know, that lasting effect sort of thing too. I mean, think about the scenario. Well, this is odd, and I saw this. Maybe you saw it too. Al Qaeda has now declared war on ISIS. Did you see that?
I did not see that. That sounds interesting.
What a nice turn of events. And so, when you have one radical group saying, you know, you boys are a little too extreme for us, we need to put an end to you, and I mean, but they
It's
end up
just a
helping
mess,
us.
that whole situation. You know, it's our country politically over the last 3 years it's so polarized. I don't think I've ever experienced it like it is right now.
I don't know. I lived through the '70s, so I don't know. There's a lot
Is
of
that pretty bad?
yeah. Well, then Reagan came along and saved everybody, so you know it was all good.
Yes.
Yeah. Then we felt united again.
Bro.
That whole, you know, the once you ring that Vietnamese conflict bell a few times and everybody gets tired of it, and then you know Carter, who's been in the news a lot lately, you know,
Yeah.
things were going poorly through the remainder of the '70s, and then as we bounce up in '80 when Reagan takes over, it felt like a fresh start, you
There's
know.
Morning
so
in America. Wasn't
yeah,
that his,
that's right.
Okay, well, you know, it's just I think it's important that every year we kind of take some time to remember that tragedy. I tell my students it's
So
the
do you
biggest
tell the
thing.
full story
I
on
mean,
that day?
I have a PowerPoint and the pictures, and we kind of go through it. There's a little 5-minute documentary thing that kind of overviews the day.
Mhm.
Because, you know, this is what's weird is I used to have some discussion questions we'd start off with. And the first one was always, where were you when it happened? What were you doing? And last year and now this year for the first time, they don't remember. They're
Right.
too young. They're
That's
2 years
yeah,
old.
and that's weird because next year, because I teach when my first group that I get are the sophomores, right? And I tell the stories too. That's my first world history classes that I have. Next year, when I tell that story to them, I'm teaching that story to a group of people that weren't even born when it happened, and it's a peculiar feeling to think that, you know, number one, that the ones now don't have a real clear understanding or cognizant memory of it, but to think that these next groups won't have been alive when it took place, it's just a weird
Yeah.
thing for me.
And it's amazing because we have a lot of students that lived in New York, and
Mm.
we have one student that was in one of the trade towers the day before.
Oh, wow, I did not know that.
And I'm not going to release his name, but that's just think about that. I mean, you know, it affected everybody, you know, and so I don't know. I think it's important to remember that to stop and at least, you know, meditate on what happened and how it affected our country, and then how we can learn from it. We're going to wrap this thing up, and we're going to try to hopefully we'll get some questions in, and we'll start answering some questions from people. But the way we're going to wrap this up this time is we're going to do a best of. We're going to try to do this every time we'll debate. I don't know who's the best, who's the most influential. What did we say we're going to do today? The most influential.
Oh, no, I thought we were going to do the lasting monuments. So
Oh,
that
okay,
we
yeah.
doing that one?
So we had a discussion. I guess I don't know when it was.
Yeah, these are our hallway discussions.
Yeah, and so we're trying to think. I think I saw a show last year that what would, like, if everybody disappeared right now, what buildings would still be around? What would last the longest?
Man-made or man-created objects would
Yeah, and
still be.
I guess I guess we came up with the pyramids. Obviously,
Mhm.
would be the longest.
They'll still be there.
You know, in how long? 100,000 years.
Oh,
You
wow.
could tell that man had been here to some degree. I
You
don't know.
think-
That's
well,
a long time.
Would they?
though.
Well, but here's the thing: would they have to be rediscovered? If we went away and the Earth reconsumes, right? Would they? I mean,
Mhm.
the objects themselves would still be there, but would they be buried up and maybe just?
I guess.
Because I've seen little pictures of that, like when they were rediscovering things. Will the sands actually cover that up? I guess so. And then you could dig down and find that to be like discovering, you know. I don't
Here's
know.
two history teachers.
But it would still
trying
be
to
there.
Talk about science.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Science people help us.
I
But,
have a
yeah.
bad science background.
But I mean, I think that would be especially considering, it could be a long time before anything ever.
What about the Great Wall?
I don't know. The wall. I mean, the wall has to be rebuilt and it has to be kept up. There may be remnants of it. I think here's the one that I go with. I'm gonna say Mount Rushmore.
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
Because granite,
Yeah, and the way they said the way they carved that is they carved it in a way where it's got about, I don't know, 2 centimeters or something of wearing away to do before it takes its ideal shape.
Oh, really?
So we're still like,
So it's not perfect yet.
yeah, we're like a century away from it being perfect. So they planned on it. And something else I heard, the Hoover Dam, because of the type of concrete,
Right.
it's a massive amount of concrete that would last a long
Barring
time.
any, well, I don't know. Barring any natural disasters, Because I mean, the mountain will. I'm still gonna stay. I'm still gonna stick with Rushmore because it's gonna.
Yeah,
It's
I
been
agree.
there.
That's a good. That's a good.
But
Yeah.
you know, and down the road, and I don't know. I don't know how many people know that unless you've been in that area, which is kind of a shame, I suppose. But they're building a Crazy Horse monument out of
Oh,
the
yeah,
same
I heard
type
about
of,
that.
and it's huge.
Yes, it is huge.
If you get a chance to go
Huge.
into this into that southwestern area of South Dakota and go visit that, make sure you see both of those because you know, and that the other one, which is still in progress, by the way, the Crazy Horse is still being they're still developing it. It's privately funded. There aren't any federal funds or any state funds that go to that I'm aware of, and but it's impressive. They've been working on it for a long time now, so
Yeah.
folks should go and see that too. I don't
Awesome.
know what else though. What else could be a lasting thing? You said the wall. That could be possibly, but what about the Pentagon? Because it goes way underground. You think that would be around or?
I don't know. I've never been there. I've been outside it, but I'm not sure with all. It's just you never know with stuff like that.
Right. Subterranean, like, what have we done? Is there anything underground? Like, are there subway tunnels and things, or would those flood out and get filled in?
Yeah, you'd think stuff like that wouldn't last as long being in the elements out
Yeah.
in the ground, but who knows if it's buried. I don't know.
Mega buildings. I think
This is
probably the
another
buildings
one.
would
This
go
is another
away.
one where people are screaming at their windshields.
Yeah.
Why
What
can't
did
you think of?
say this? It's so obvious. Yeah, I think that I don't know Eiffel Tower. How often do you have to paint it before it? You know,
Yeah.
if you stop painting it, how long will it last before it deteriorates? Golden Gate Bridge will be gone. You know, the ocean will eat it.
Right. Yeah.
So
Okay. Well, there's the best monuments.
best
lasting.
monuments, America. There we go.
Yeah, we're
That's
gonna
it's
go
us.
with the what is it? The what do we say? Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna go with that.
Number 1 on the list. You're welcome.
All right. Well, this is History After Hours podcast, episode 1, and yeah, we'll check back with you later.